Halloween is coming up, and boy do I've got a scary story for you. It doesn't matter whether you're on the right or the left. You should be very, very afraid of Joe Biden. Both sides get Biden completely wrong. This video isn't intended to push a partisan point of view. I'm not going to argue that Joe Biden is going to bungle the coronavirus. The point isn't to criticize how he'll handle the economy. If you can't stand Trump, nothing in this video is going to try and persuade you otherwise. I merely post this video as a warning. If Biden is elected, his administration will end up raising a lot of questions. Questions like, how come nobody warned us about this? The answer to that question will be, I warned you. This video warned you. In 1987, Joe Biden was campaigning to be the Democratic nominee for president. Ronald Reagan was wrapping up his second term. The general election was wide open. We all know that the presidential primaries begin in Iowa. For Biden, Iowa would be both the beginning and the end. On September 24th, 1987, Joe Biden gave a speech at the Iowa State Fair. Not long after giving this speech, Joe Biden was revealed to be a fraud. He had plagiarized his statement from a UK Labour Party leader. Despite the controversy, Joe Biden kept on campaigning. That is until other articles started coming out, revealing even more fraud. For example, Joe Biden had lied repeatedly about his law school ranking. He said he graduated towards the top of his class. In reality, he was ranked 76th in a class of only 85 students. Joe Biden dropped out of the race in total disgrace. One might have thought that his political career was over. In fact, the complete opposite was true. The scandal revealed that Joe Biden had all of the qualities of a successful politician: a willingness to lie, a lack of a moral conscience, an ambition for power. Most importantly, though, he had a low-level intelligence that could make him dependent on other people. A year later, the election approaches. President Ronald Reagan is confident that Vice President Bush will succeed him. After all, the two were on the verge of accomplishing the unthinkable, a peaceful end to the Cold War, the dissolution of the USSR. The Soviet Union split apart and Eastern Europe was freed. People expected major change to result from this. Shouldn't the US shut down its bases in Germany and Asia? Now that we'd won, wouldn't it be prime time to focus on boosting our own country's prosperity? We had enough nukes that nobody would even think to try and fuck with us. America isn't supposed to be an empire. We had to liberate ourselves from the British Empire. It's against our national character to become one. It's akin to spitting on the graves of the founders. At least, that's what the greatest generation who won World War II thought. After winning that war, we made Germany, France, and Japan into independent nations. We even liberated the Philippines, even though it had been part of the United States for the last 50 years. Sure, we kept bases in a lot of these countries, but that was in order to protect against the Red Menace. The people running our government in the 90s had a very different idea. What if America used its military dominance to create a global empire? One based on free trade and capitalism. The US military could be deployed as some sort of global police force. The people who came up with these ideas were the original neoliberals. How do you define a neoliberal? Well, I'd say that neoliberals generally support three things: libertarian economics, globalism, and identity politics. If you support two or three of these, and you aren't a socialist, then you're a neoliberal. Neoliberalism quickly became the dominant political philosophy of both parties. From George H.W. Bush to Barack Obama, there had been uninterrupted neoliberal control of both branches of Congress and the presidency. After September 11th, George W. Bush evolved neoliberal philosophy into neoconservatism. Despite the name, there was nothing conservative about it. A neocon is a crusader for neoliberalism. There's only one major difference between the two. Neocons believed the US military should forcibly expand neoliberalism to illiberal countries. So the US invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. The hope was that they'd install liberal democracies and it would create a domino effect across the Mideast. In fact, it did create a domino effect through the Arab Spring. Instead of liberal democracies, though, we ended up getting democratic theocracies. Millions of people lost their lives because of these wars. They've cost us over $6 trillion. If we withdrew our troops today, there's a strong chance that the governments we installed would get wiped out instantaneously. That's why we're still there today, trying to prop them up. Around this time, Vladimir Putin took advantage of unrest in Russia and seized power. Russia's economy had been looted by foreign vulture capitalists, picking apart the remnants of the former Soviet Empire. Because of this, Russians were willing to put their faith into someone like Putin. After all, there's really no difference between a plutocracy and a dictatorship. This drove the neolibs absolutely fucking bananas. The conquest of the Soviet Union was what had launched the entire neoliberal world order to begin with. This demanded nothing short of international sanctions and an entire restart to the Cold War.
Carried, Russian officials say, by a suicide bomber goes off. The result is carnage.
I saw people die on the floor and people lying on the luggage trolleys.
The impotent rage of the neoliberals made absolutely no sense. Russia's business ought to be the concern of the Russians themselves. Neolibs and neocons had no business getting involved. Is it even surprising that Russia ended up succumbing to a dictator? Well, they were never offered the opportunity to join NATO, even during the brief period of time that they were a liberal democracy. The European Union also declined to send an invitation to Russia. Had Russia had the opportunity to join the EU, they may have been able to rebuild their economy just like Eastern Europe was able to do. What about the US? Russia trusted President Reagan when it chose to dissolve the Soviet Union. Yet the United States didn't seem to help Russia during its transition. US-based private equity firms, working in conjunction with Russian oligarchs, liquidated the assets of existing businesses and transferred them overseas. Neocons don't give a shit about context, though. Economic sanctions were slapped on the Russia and a new Cold War began. By 2008, people were fucking tired of these Middle East wars. They were willing to vote for whoever would finally end these worthless conflicts. So they picked the most out there person they possibly could. A guy who ran hard against the wars. Barack Hussein Obama. Surely someone with a name like that would stop the US from fucking around in the Mideast. Despite his many promises, Obama kept the wars going for another 8 years. In fact, the US soon found itself involved in even more Middle Eastern conflicts. In 2011, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton feuded with Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Clinton wanted to use the US military to assist rebels with overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi. Obama reluctantly sided with Clinton. The result was a total disaster. Millions of refugees flooded into Europe. Islamic militias spread throughout the Middle East. Hardline Islamism gained increased influence in Libya. Not long after this, another civil war broke out in Syria. Hillary Clinton and CIA Director Petraeus came up with another plan to send the CIA to Syria in order to train Islamic fighters to fight Assad. Based on the complete shit show that happened last time, Obama said, hell no. Instead, Obama tried to negotiate a solution to the crisis with Russia. Despite Obama poo-pooing the plan, somehow the CIA ended up in Syria anyways. Obama hadn't wanted them to go there. It's not clear exactly how they got there, but there they were. Around this time, Hillary Clinton resigned as Secretary of State. This is supposedly due to health reasons. Of course, those health reasons didn't stop her from running for president just a few years later. The situation in Syria bears a striking resemblance to the start of the Spanish-American War. U.S. elites wanted the U.S. to become an empire like the European nations. President McKinley, though, didn't agree with this. When the Secretary of Navy was out to lunch one day, Assistant Secretary Teddy Roosevelt was left in charge. Teddy Roosevelt ordered the Navy to invade Manila Bay. By the time Secretary Long got back, it was too late. The war had already started. Roosevelt resigned from his post and he ended up joining the army. He led the land invasion into the Philippines and became a national hero. This allowed him to later on become the president of the United States. Back to Syria. Russia feared, with very good reason, that the US was a hostile imperial power looking to topple Syria's government. All appearances were that Obama had double-crossed them. So Russia began to involve itself directly in the Syrian civil war. The CIA is nice and all. How about some actual soldiers though? Well, with Hillary Clinton gone, who would take her place as the white knight in support of war? Well, none other than the kid sniffer himself. At the urging of Biden, Obama received approval from Congress to deploy troops to Syria for 60 days. Yet, those troops are still there, 6 years later. So let's get this straight. First, Obama says no CIA in Syria. Then CIA ends up in Syria. Then Obama and Congress agree to 60 days. Well, it's been 6 years. They're still there. Now, I could talk about Trump at this point, but this video is for the left. You probably hate Trump, and that's okay. So let's talk about Hillary Clinton instead. In the 2016 primary, she had only one opponent, socialist Bernie Sanders. So the race came down to a neoliberal versus a socialist. It should be obvious who Obama should prefer, right? Obama, the king of the neoliberals, would surely prefer Clinton. Yet Obama didn't endorse Clinton until June 9th. This wasn't until after she had won the Democratic primary. Obama literally waited until the last possible moment to endorse her. It's almost like he didn't trust her, like she had left his administration on bad terms. On April 14, 2020, Obama endorsed Joe Biden for president. Again, this was not until after Bernie Sanders had dropped out. At that point, there was no one left besides Joe Biden. Why didn't Obama endorse Joe Biden earlier? Also consider a lot of the other weird shit going on with the Democratic primary. Why did Pete Buttigieg drop out of the race before Super Tuesday? He won the Iowa caucus. He tied for first place in New Hampshire. Who the fuck wins the first two primaries and then drops out? Not long after this, on March 12, 2020, Pete Buttigieg hosted an episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. What the fuck? Why? Everything about Pete Buttigieg is weird and shady. Buttigieg started his career as a consultant with McKinsey & Company. McKinsey is a management consulting company known for its wealthy clients and numerous controversies. From there, Buttigieg worked in a military intelligence unit that worked alongside the CIA. He then became the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Finally, he ended up being the leading presidential candidate in the 2020 Democratic primary. To say that Pete Buttigieg's career path is bizarre would be a massive fucking understatement. None of the positions that he's held appear to be remotely related to each other. Back to Biden. Does Joe Biden have dementia? Well, I'll let you decide that for yourself. What you can't deny is Joe Biden has handlers. Biden isn't calling the shots when it comes to his presidential campaign. Other people are. People who are control freaks. They don't let him out very often. They control what he does and doesn't say. They don't want him to go on a show like Joe Rogan. They'll push for as many breaks as possible during the debates. They'd love for any future debates to be done virtually. They have more control over everything that way. So who exactly are these people? Well, I think that's obvious. They're Hillary Clinton's people. The neocons. The ones who aggressively pushed to put troops troops in Libya and Syria, the ones who lost Obama's trust. A lot of people on the right warn that if Joe Biden becomes president, it'll actually be Kamala Harris running the show. Those of us on the right are supposed to be concerned about that because Kamala Harris is much further to the left. I say bullshit. Joe Biden already had handlers when he picked Kamala. Kamala was chosen because she listens to handlers. After all, we're talking about a person who slept her way into the position she currently holds. Joe Biden isn't going to deliver any of these things that he's promising. There's not going to be any climate change plan. You're not getting criminal justice reform. Obamacare isn't going to be expanded anytime soon. I doubt you'll even see a reversal of the Trump tax cuts. For any of these things to happen, it would require an act on behalf of Congress. Congress isn't going to want to do any of this shit. Remember, they're just a bunch of neolibs. Remember how hard it was for Obama to pass Obamacare? That was when his party controlled both branches of Congress. Joe Biden isn't doing any of this shit. What you will see from a Joe Biden administration is more wars. That's what his neocon handlers want. It's what they'll have unlimited power to do if Joe Biden is elected. The bottom line is, it's up to you whether to believe this or not. Just don't say that nobody warned you. If you like this video and you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please support small YouTube channels like mine by subscribing. Thanks.